Michael Harrison was the kind of intelligence analyst who made foreign adversaries lose sleep at night. For 12 years, he had been the CIA's go-to expert on Eastern European weapons trafficking, a man whose reports could shift international policy and whose insights had prevented countless illegal arms from reaching terrorist organizations. But on March 15, 2000, this brilliant analyst walked out of his secure office at Langley and vanished without a trace, taking with him secrets that could have destabilized entire governments. The morning started like any other. Harrison arrived at CIA headquarters at 6:47 a.m., badged in through multiple security checkpoints, and settled into his windowless office on the third floor of the Intelligence Analysis Division. His colleagues remember him as focused but unusually tense that day, fielding encrypted phone calls and requesting access to classified files that were outside his normal purview. At 2:15 p.m., Harrison told his supervisor he was stepping out for lunch. The security cameras captured him walking through the parking garage, getting into his silver Honda Accord, and driving toward the exit. That was the last confirmed sighting of Michael Harrison alive. When he failed to return from lunch, his supervisor initially assumed he had been called to an urgent briefing. CIA analysts often disappeared into classified meetings without notice. But as the afternoon stretched into evening, concern began to mount. Harrison had never missed a scheduled briefing, never failed to file a required report, never simply vanished without explanation. By 8 p.m., when Harrison hadn't answered his phone or responded to secure communications, the CIA initiated its internal missing person protocol. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Harrison's apartment showed no signs of struggle, but several items were conspicuously absent: his laptop computer, a locked briefcase he kept in his bedroom closet, and most telling of all, a thick file folder he had been working on for weeks regarding suspected arms dealers operating along the Romanian-Serbian border. The initial investigation revealed that Harrison had been under enormous pressure in the weeks before his disappearance. He had been working 18-hour days on a case that his colleagues knew was sensitive, but the details were compartmentalized above their security clearance. Phone records showed multiple calls to and from untraceable numbers. Bank records revealed unusual cash withdrawals, totaling nearly $15,000 over the previous month. But perhaps most disturbing was what investigators found in Harrison's desk: a hastily written note tucked inside a classified manual, almost as if he had hidden it there for someone to discover. The note contained 3 words: "They found me." No signature, no explanation. Just those 3 chilling words that suggested Michael Harrison knew his life was in danger. The question that haunted everyone who knew him was simple but terrifying. What had this dedicated intelligence analyst discovered that was worth killing for? And who were they, the people he believed had found him? The CIA's Internal Security Division took control of the Harrison investigation within hours of his disappearance, classifying it at the highest levels of secrecy. Agent Sarah Chen, a 15-year veteran of counterintelligence operations, was assigned as lead investigator. What she discovered in her initial review made her realize this wasn't just a missing person case. It was a potential breach of national security, with implications that could reach the highest levels of government. Harrison's work in the months before his disappearance had focused on a sophisticated arms trafficking network that appeared to be funneling weapons from former Soviet states into Western Europe and beyond. His analysis had identified patterns that suggested the operation wasn't just criminal enterprise. It had the hallmarks of state-sponsored activity, possibly involving intelligence services from multiple countries. Michael had stumbled onto something massive. Chen later testified in closed congressional hearings. His reports suggested this wasn't just about illegal weapons sales. Someone was using arms trafficking as cover for a broader intelligence operation, possibly involving the recruitment and placement of assets throughout NATO countries. The investigation quickly expanded beyond the CIA. The FBI's counterintelligence division joined the search. as did elements of military intelligence and the NSA. Harrison's disappearance had occurred during one of the most sensitive periods in post-Cold War intelligence work, when relationships with former Soviet states were being recalibrated, and new threats were emerging from previously unknown actors. Chen's team discovered that Harrison had been in contact with a confidential informant known only by the codename Blackbird, someone with inside knowledge of the trafficking network, who had been providing information for several months. The last communication from Blackbird had come just 2 days before Harrison's disappearance. Package compromised. They know about the American. Extraction needed immediately. But when agents tried to re-establish contact with Blackbird, they found that all communication channels had gone dead. The elaborate system of encrypted messages, dead drops, and coded phone calls that had been used to maintain contact for months had simply evaporated. It was as if Blackbird had never existed. The search for Harrison expanded internationally. CIA stations in Eastern Europe were put on high alert. Interpol issued a classified bulletin to Allied intelligence services. Satellite imagery of known trafficking routes was analyzed for any sign of Harrison or his vehicle, but weeks passed without a single credible lead. Meanwhile, the pressure was mounting from the highest levels of government. He had been working on intelligence that affected ongoing negotiations with several NATO allies. His disappearance, and the possibility that he had been compromised or killed, threatened to derail delicate diplomatic relationships that had taken years to establish. The worst-case scenario wasn't just that Michael was dead. Chen explained to her superiors. The worst case was that he was alive and being interrogated by hostile intelligence services. The information he possessed could have compromised dozens of ongoing operations and put countless assets at risk. As the investigation stretched into its second month, a disturbing possibility began to emerge. What if Harrison hadn't been kidnapped by foreign agents? What if the threat had come from much closer to home? The note found in his desk, "They found me," could have referred to anyone. Foreign spies, criminal organizations, or even elements within the U.S. intelligence community itself. The realization that Harrison might have been killed by people he trusted added a new dimension of paranoia to an already complex investigation. Who could be trusted? How deep did the conspiracy go? And most importantly, was anyone else in danger? 2 years passed without a single breakthrough in the Harrison case. The initial intensity of the investigation had given way to a frustrating routine of following dead-end leads and re-examining evidence that yielded no new insights. Agent Chen had been reassigned to other cases, though she continued to review Harrison's file whenever new intelligence about Eastern European arms trafficking crossed her desk. The case had been officially designated as cold but active, meaning that while no new resources were being dedicated to finding Harrison, any relevant information would be immediately investigated. His family, an elderly mother in Ohio and a sister in California, continued to hope for answers, but they had been told very little about the circumstances of his disappearance due to the classified nature of his work. The intelligence community had moved on. The arms trafficking network that Harrison had been investigating had seemingly dissolved, with key figures disappearing or turning up dead in various European cities. Whether this was the result of internal power struggles or external pressure was impossible to determine, but the practical effect was that Harrison's last case had become as much of a mystery as his disappearance. It was during this period of apparent dormancy that the most significant development in the case occurred, though no one would realize its importance for another 2 years. In August 2002, a routine audit of CIA expense accounts identified an anomaly in Harrison's final months of work. He had been submitting receipts for travel and lodging that didn't match his official travel schedule. The receipts were for a motel in rural Virginia called the Pine Ridge Inn, a rundown establishment about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. Harrison had apparently been staying there periodically over a 3-month period, always paying in cash, always registering under false names. The motel's records showed someone matching Harrison's description had been a regular guest, often arriving late at night and leaving before dawn. When investigators finally visited the Pine Ridge Inn in late 2002, they found an establishment that seemed frozen in time. The elderly owner, Robert Kowalski, remembered Harrison well, though he knew him only as Mr. Johnson, one of several aliases Harrison had apparently been using. He was nervous, always looking over his shoulder. Kowalski told investigators, paid in cash, never wanted housekeeping, always parked his car around back where it couldn't be seen from the road. I figured he was having an affair or hiding from creditors. Didn't think much of it until you folks showed up asking questions. The revelation that Harrison had been conducting secret meetings at the Pine Ridge Inn opened up new possibilities about his disappearance. Had he been meeting with Blackbird there? Had he discovered something that required this level of secrecy, even from his CIA colleagues? Or had he been involved in activities that went beyond his official duties? The motel room Harrison had used most frequently was searched thoroughly, but 2 years after his disappearance, any physical evidence had long since been cleaned away by housekeeping. The only item of potential significance was a small piece of paper found wedged behind the headboard, a fragment with what appeared to be coordinates written in Harrison's handwriting. The coordinates pointed to a location about 10 miles from the motel, in a heavily forested area that was used primarily for hunting and off-road recreation. When agents searched the coordinates, they found nothing but dense woods and rocky terrain. Whatever Harrison had been doing there, if anything, remained a mystery. As 2003 turned into 2004, the Harrison case seemed to be heading toward permanent cold case status. The initial urgency had faded, replaced by the bureaucratic reality that resources had to be allocated to more active threats. The intelligence community had adapted to operating without Harrison's expertise, and the world had moved on to new crises and challenges. But sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're not looking for them. And in March 2004, exactly 4 years after Harrison's disappearance, a construction crew working on a highway expansion project near the Pine Ridge Inn would uncover evidence that would transform the case from a missing person investigation into something far more sinister. The construction crew had been working on the highway expansion for 3 weeks when their excavator hit something that shouldn't have been there. What initially appeared to be a large rock buried beneath 6 feet of dirt and debris turned out to be the roof of a silver Honda Accord. The exact make and model of the car Michael Harrison had been driving when he disappeared 4 years earlier. The discovery was made on March 18, 2004, just 3 days after the 4th anniversary of Harrison's disappearance. The construction site was immediately secured, and within hours, FBI and CIA investigators had descended on the scene. The car had been buried in a makeshift grave about 200 yards behind the Pine Ridge Inn, in an area that had been heavily overgrown until the construction project cleared the land. Agent Chen, who had never stopped thinking about the Harrison case despite her reassignment, was called back to lead the investigation. What she found when the car was carefully excavated sent chills through the entire intelligence community. The Honda was in remarkably good condition for having been buried for 4 years. The interior was intact, preserved by the sealed environment of the makeshift grave. But it was what investigators found inside that made this discovery truly horrifying. In the trunk, wrapped in plastic sheeting, were the skeletal remains of a human being. Preliminary examination suggested the bones belonged to a male of Harrison's approximate age and height. More disturbing were the circumstances of death. The skeleton showed clear evidence of trauma, including what appeared to be multiple skull fractures and signs of bound wrists. But the body in the trunk wasn't Michael Harrison. Dental records would later confirm that the remains belonged to Victor Petrov, a Romanian national who had been on the CIA's watch list as a suspected arms trafficker. Petrov was someone Harrison had been tracking as part of his investigation into the Eastern European weapons network. The implications were staggering. If Harrison had killed Petrov, it suggested that the mild-mannered intelligence analyst had been living a double life that none of his colleagues suspected. If Harrison hadn't killed Petrov, then someone else had used his car to dispose of a body, which raised even more disturbing questions about what had happened to both men. Inside the car's glove compartment, investigators found documents that provided crucial clues about Harrison's final days. There were detailed notes about planned meetings, including references to the exchange and final payment. Most significantly, there was a small notebook containing what appeared to be account numbers for banks in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. The evidence painted a picture that contradicted everything Harrison's colleagues thought they knew about him. Had he been selling intelligence to foreign buyers? Had he been working as a double agent? Or had he discovered something so dangerous that he had been forced to take extraordinary measures to protect himself? Agent Chen's investigation team expanded their search of the area around the Pine Ridge Inn. Using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs, they methodically examined every square foot of the surrounding property. What they found buried in a shallow grave about 50 yards from Harrison's car would answer some questions while raising many others. The second body was immediately identifiable as Michael Harrison through dental records and DNA analysis. But the manner of his death suggested that his disappearance had been far from voluntary. Harrison had been shot twice in the head at close range, execution style. His body showed evidence of torture, cigarette burns, broken fingers, and other signs that he had been interrogated before being killed. Most telling of all were the personal effects found with Harrison's body. He was still wearing his CIA identification badge, as if his killers had wanted there to be no doubt about who he was. And clutched in his skeletal hand was a small piece of paper with a phone number, a number that, when traced, led to a secure line at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. The discovery of Harrison's body transformed the investigation from a missing person case into a double homicide with international implications. But it also raised fundamental questions about the intelligence analyst's final months. Had he been a victim of foreign espionage, a casualty of internal CIA politics, or had he been involved in something so complex and dangerous that even his death couldn't end it? The discovery of both bodies behind the Pine Ridge Inn launched the most intensive counterintelligence investigation in CIA history. Agent Chen found herself at the center of a case that seemed to grow more complex with each piece of evidence uncovered. The question was no longer simply what had happened to Michael Harrison. It was whether the entire Eastern European arms trafficking investigation had been compromised from the beginning. The notebook found in Harrison's car contained more than just bank account numbers. Forensic analysis revealed coded references to weapon shipments, meeting locations, and what appeared to be a network of contacts spanning multiple countries. But most disturbing were the dates. The notebook contained entries that continued right up until the day of Harrison's disappearance, suggesting he had been actively involved in whatever operation had gotten him killed. The phone number clutched in Harrison's dead hand led investigators down a rabbit hole of diplomatic intrigue. The number belonged to Dmitry Volkov, officially listed as a cultural attaché at the Russian embassy, but widely suspected by U.S. intelligence of being a senior SVR officer, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. When confronted by FBI agents, Volkov claimed diplomatic immunity and refused to answer questions about his connection to Harrison. But surveillance records revealed that Volkov had left the United States abruptly on March 16, 2000, the day after Harrison's disappearance. He had not returned since, despite his official posting extending for another 2 years. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Chen's investigation team began reconstructing Harrison's activities in the months before his death, using financial records, surveillance footage, and testimony from the few people who had interacted with him during his secret visits to the Pine Ridge Inn. What emerged was a picture of a man under enormous pressure, conducting clandestine meetings with individuals whose identities remained unknown. The motel's owner, Robert Kowalski, provided crucial details about Harrison's final weeks. He was different that last month, Kowalski told investigators. Scared, I guess you could say. He asked me about security cameras, wanted to know if I had them. When I said no, he seemed relieved, started paying me extra to make sure nobody bothered him when he was here. Kowalski also remembered seeing other people at the motel during Harrison's visits, men who spoke with accents he couldn't identify, women who seemed nervous and kept looking over their shoulders. The motel had become a meeting place for individuals involved in activities they clearly didn't want observed. The breakthrough came when forensic accountants traced the bank account numbers from Harrison's notebook. The accounts contained millions of dollars in deposits and withdrawals, with transactions occurring in multiple countries over a period of 2 years. The pattern of activity suggested these weren't legitimate business accounts, but rather financial instruments being used to facilitate illegal arms sales. More significantly, the financial records showed that someone had been systematically emptying the accounts in the days immediately following Harrison's disappearance. Whoever had killed him had also moved quickly to secure the money he had been managing. The investigation revealed that Harrison had been living a double life that went far beyond his official CIA duties. Using his legitimate intelligence work as cover, he had apparently been serving as a financial facilitator for the very arms trafficking network he was supposed to be investigating. But whether he had been a willing participant or had been coerced into cooperation remained unclear. The discovery of Viktor Petrov's body in Harrison's car suggested that the operation had gone wrong in some fundamental way. Petrov had been one of the key figures in the arms trafficking network, someone who would have had intimate knowledge of how the money was being moved and where the weapons were being delivered. His death indicated that the carefully maintained balance of the operation had collapsed. Chen began to develop a theory about what had happened in Harrison's final days. She believed that he had discovered he was being used by both sides, providing intelligence to the CIA, while unknowingly facilitating Russian intelligence operations. When he tried to extract himself from the situation, both his CIA handlers and his foreign contacts had decided he was too dangerous to be allowed to live. The evidence supporting this theory was circumstantial but compelling. Harrison's increased nervousness, his cash withdrawals, his secret meetings at the Pine Ridge Inn, all suggested a man trying to prepare for a life on the run. The note found in his desk, "They found me," took on new meaning when viewed in this context. Harrison hadn't been killed by foreign agents or criminal organizations. He had been killed by people he trusted, people who had decided his usefulness was outweighed by the risk he represented. As Agent Chen delved deeper into Harrison's secret life, she began to uncover evidence of a conspiracy that reached far beyond one rogue intelligence analyst. The financial records from the Swiss and Cayman Island accounts revealed a pattern of transactions that suggested multiple CIA personnel had been involved in facilitating arms sale to unauthorized buyers. The investigation took a dangerous turn when Chen attempted to interview other CIA analysts who had worked with Harrison on Eastern European cases. 3 separate individuals contacted for interviews suddenly requested transfers to other divisions. A 4th analyst, Rebecca Martinez, agreed to speak with Chen, but was killed in what appeared to be a random carjacking 2 days before their scheduled meeting. The pattern was becoming clear. Chen later testified in closed congressional hearings. Someone within the CIA hierarchy was eliminating anyone who might have knowledge of Harrison's activities. This wasn't just about covering up one analyst's misconduct. This was about protecting a systematic corruption that had been operating for years. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, a cleaning contractor who had worked at CIA headquarters, came forward with information about unusual activities she had observed in the weeks before Harrison's disappearance. Santos had noticed that certain analysts were working unusually late hours, often meeting in conference rooms that were supposed to be unused after standard business hours. More significantly, Santos had seen Harrison meeting with Deputy Director of Operations Thomas Brennan on multiple occasions, meetings that weren't reflected in any official schedule. Brennan was one of the most senior officials in the CIA, someone with access to the most sensitive intelligence operations. If he had been involved with Harrison's activities, it suggested the corruption reached the highest levels of the agency. When Chen attempted to interview Brennan, she was informed that he had taken early retirement just weeks after Harrison's body was discovered. He had moved to a private security consulting firm and was unavailable for comment. His sudden departure from a position he had held for over a decade raised obvious questions about his potential involvement in the conspiracy. The investigation revealed that Brennan had been the primary liaison between the CIA and several Eastern European intelligence services during the period when Harrison was conducting his arms trafficking investigation. He would have been in a position to know about Harrison's activities and to potentially facilitate the illegal operations that appeared to have been taking place. Financial records showed that Brennan had made several large real estate purchases in the months before his retirement, paying cash for properties worth over $2 million. The source of this money couldn't be explained by his CIA salary, suggesting he had been receiving payments from outside sources. Chen's investigation team discovered that the arms trafficking network Harrison had been investigating wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a joint operation between Russian intelligence and corrupt elements within the CIA. Weapons were being diverted from legitimate sales to allied nations and redirected to buyers who were supposed to be under international sanctions. The operation had been sophisticated and carefully planned. Russian intelligence would identify weapons shipments that could be diverted without immediately raising suspicions. CIA personnel with access to the relevant intelligence would provide information about shipping schedules, security arrangements, and alternative buyers. The diverted weapons would be sold on the black market, with profits shared between the Russian operatives and their CIA collaborators. Harrison's role had been to provide the financial infrastructure for these sales, using his legitimate intelligence work as cover. He had established bank accounts and financial networks that could move money without triggering the automated monitoring systems used by U.S. Treasury Department. But something had gone wrong, and the carefully maintained balance of the operation had collapsed. The evidence suggested that Harrison had discovered he was being monitored by FBI counterintelligence agents who were closing in on the arms trafficking network. Facing the prospect of arrest and exposure, he had attempted to negotiate immunity by offering to provide evidence against his CIA collaborators. This decision had sealed his fate. Viktor Petrov, the arms dealer found dead in Harrison's car, had apparently been brought to the United States to help eliminate Harrison and tie up the loose ends of the operation. But Petrov himself had become a liability, someone with intimate knowledge of Russian intelligence operations who could potentially be compromised. If captured by U.S. authorities, the double murder at the Pine Ridge Inn had been designed to eliminate both Harrison and Petrov, while making it appear that they had killed each other in some kind of business dispute. The plan had nearly worked. If not for the highway construction project 4 years later, their bodies might never have been discovered. As Agent Chen's investigation expanded, she found herself fighting not just to solve Harrison's murder, but to survive the efforts to silence her. 3 attempts were made on her life in the span of 2 weeks: a car bomb that failed to detonate, a break-in at her apartment that appeared to be an assassination attempt rather than a robbery, and a staged accident that she avoided only through luck and paranoia. The message was clear. Powerful people wanted the Harrison investigation to disappear. But Chen had spent 15 years in counterintelligence work, and she knew how to protect herself while continuing to gather evidence. She began working with a small team of trusted FBI agents, operating outside normal CIA channels to avoid the corruption that had apparently infected the agency's highest levels. The investigation revealed that Deputy Director Brennan had not acted alone. Financial records and communication intercepts showed that at least 6 other senior CIA officials had been involved in the arms trafficking operation. The conspiracy had operated like a parallel intelligence agency, using legitimate CIA resources to facilitate illegal activities, while maintaining plausible deniability through compartmentalized information and off-the-books operations. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Over a 5-year period, the conspirators had diverted weapons worth over $50 million, facilitating sales to terrorist organizations, drug cartels, and rogue states that were supposed to be under strict international sanctions. The profits had been shared among the participants and used to fund additional covert operations that had never been authorized by Congress or the President. Harrison's death had been ordered when FBI counterintelligence agents began investigating unusual financial transactions connected to the arms sales. Someone within the conspiracy had learned that Harrison was being monitored and had decided that eliminating him was preferable to risking exposure of the entire operation. The murder had been carried out by a team of Russian operatives working under Dmitry Volkov's direction. Harrison had been lured to a meeting at the Pine Ridge Inn under the pretense of discussing a new arms shipment. Instead, he had been captured, tortured for information about what he might have told U.S. authorities, and then executed. Viktor Petrov's presence at the meeting had been intended as a show of good faith proof that the Russian side of the operation remained committed to continuing their collaboration despite the increased security scrutiny. But Petrov had also been eliminated to prevent him from potentially providing information to U.S. investigators if he were ever captured. The bodies had been buried behind the Pine Ridge Inn because the location was remote enough to avoid immediate discovery but accessible enough for the killers to complete their work quickly. The choice to bury Harrison's car with Petrov's body inside had been intended to create confusion about the circumstances of their deaths if the remains were ever discovered. Chen's investigation team discovered that the conspiracy had continued operating even after Harrison's death. New financial facilitators had been recruited, and the arms trafficking network had expanded into new regions. The profits were being used not just for personal enrichment, but to fund covert operations in multiple countries without congressional oversight or authorization. The evidence Chen had assembled was damning, but presenting it posed enormous challenges. Many of the people implicated in the conspiracy held senior positions in the U.S. intelligence community. Others had moved to private sector positions, where they maintained relationships with current government officials. The network of corruption and influence was so extensive that Chen wasn't sure who could be trusted with the information she had uncovered. The decision to go public with her findings was made when Chen learned that plans were being developed to eliminate her entire investigation team. Intercepted communications suggested that the conspirators were preparing to stage a terrorist attack that would kill Chen and her FBI colleagues, while destroying the evidence they had gathered. Rather than wait to become victims, Chen and her team decided to release their findings simultaneously to multiple news organizations, congressional committees, and international law enforcement agencies. The coordinated release was designed to make it impossible for the conspirators to suppress the information or eliminate all the people who possessed it. The release of Agent Chen's investigation findings in October 2004 triggered the largest internal investigation in CIA history. Within days of the revelations becoming public, congressional committees launched hearings, the FBI opened multiple criminal investigations, and international allies began reviewing their own intelligence relationships with the United States. Deputy Director Thomas Brennan was arrested at his Virginia home on charges of espionage, conspiracy, and murder. His attempts to claim that his actions were authorized covert operations were undermined by the extensive financial evidence showing personal enrichment from illegal arms sales. 5 other senior CIA officials were also arrested, along with dozens of lower-level personnel who had facilitated various aspects of the conspiracy. The international implications of the scandal were enormous. Several NATO allies temporarily suspended intelligence sharing agreements, with the United States pending reviews of their own security procedures. Russia denied any official involvement in the arms trafficking operation, claiming that Dmitry Volkov and other implicated individuals had been acting without authorization. The criminal trials that followed were conducted largely in secret due to the classified nature of much of the evidence, but the basic facts became public through congressional testimony and court filings. The conspiracy had operated for over 7 years, facilitating illegal arms sales worth over $200 million, while undermining U.S. foreign policy objectives in multiple regions. Michael Harrison was posthumously recognized as a whistleblower whose attempts to expose the conspiracy had cost him his life. His family received a settlement from the U.S. government, acknowledging that his death had resulted from his efforts to report illegal activities within the CIA. The settlement included provisions for enhanced security for family members, recognizing that the network of corruption Harrison had exposed might still pose threats to his relatives. Thomas Brennan was convicted on 17 separate charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing hearing, he attempted to justify his actions by claiming that the arms sales had provided funding for legitimate covert operations that Congress would not have authorized. The judge rejected this argument, stating that no legitimate intelligence purpose could justify the systematic violation of federal law and the murder of a fellow intelligence officer. The other conspirators received sentences ranging from 15 years to life in prison. Several cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced sentences, providing information about additional corruption within the intelligence community. The full scope of the conspiracy was never completely revealed, as many documents had been destroyed and some participants had fled the country. Viktor Petrov's death was officially attributed to the conspiracy, though the specific details of his murder were never fully established. Russian authorities refused to cooperate with the investigation, claiming that Petrov had been a private citizen whose activities were not officially sanctioned. His family in Romania received no official acknowledgement of his death or explanation of the circumstances. Agent Sarah Chen was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her investigation, though the ceremony was conducted in private due to security concerns. Her career in intelligence work effectively ended with the Harrison case, as the enemies she had made within the intelligence community made continued service impossible. She retired from government service and became a private investigator specializing in cases involving government corruption. The Pine Ridge Inn, where Harrison had conducted his final meetings, was demolished as part of the highway expansion project. The site where his body was discovered was marked with a small memorial stone, though the inscription simply reads, "In memory of those who served their country with honor," a deliberately vague tribute that acknowledges Harrison's sacrifice without revealing the classified details of his death. The CIA underwent major reforms following the scandal, including new oversight procedures and enhanced security protocols designed to prevent similar corruption. But critics argued that the fundamental problems that had allowed the conspiracy to operate, excessive secrecy, inadequate oversight, and a culture that prioritized loyalty over accountability, remained largely unchanged. More than 20 years have passed since Michael Harrison walked out of CIA headquarters for the last time, and his case continues to raise troubling questions about accountability within the U.S. intelligence community. While the criminal prosecutions that followed Agent Chen's investigation resulted in significant prison sentences for the main conspirators, many observers believe that the full scope of the corruption was never revealed. The arms trafficking network that Harrison had been investigating, and that ultimately cost him his life, represented just one example of how legitimate intelligence operations could be corrupted for personal gain. The profits generated from illegal weapons sales had been used to fund unauthorized covert operations around the world, creating a shadow intelligence apparatus that operated without congressional oversight or presidential authorization. Harrison's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers faced by intelligence officers who attempt to expose wrongdoing within their own agencies. His death illustrates how the same skills and resources used to protect national security can be turned against those who threaten to reveal institutional corruption. The fact that his murder was carried out by foreign agents working in collaboration with CIA personnel highlights the complex international nature of modern intelligence threats. The reforms implemented following the Harrison scandal have had mixed results. Enhanced oversight procedures have made it more difficult for large-scale corruption to operate undetected, but the fundamental tension between security and accountability remains. Intelligence agencies continue to argue that excessive oversight hampers their ability to protect national security, while critics contend that inadequate transparency enables continued abuse. Agent Chen's investigation also revealed the crucial role that seemingly minor details can play in major criminal cases. The highway construction project that led to the discovery of Harrison's buried car was pure chance. Without that accidental discovery, the conspiracy might have continued operating indefinitely. The case demonstrates how criminal investigations often depend on luck as much as skill, and how the most carefully planned cover-ups can be undone by unexpected circumstances. The international implications of the Harrison case continue to influence U.S. intelligence relationships decades later. Several allied nations implemented additional security procedures for intelligence sharing, recognizing that corruption within partner agencies could compromise their own operations. The case also highlighted the challenges of conducting counterintelligence operations in an environment where potential threats could come from within allied organizations. Perhaps most significantly, Harrison's case illustrates the personal cost of intelligence work in ways that are rarely acknowledged publicly. Intelligence officers operate in environments of constant suspicion and deception, where the line between legitimate operations and illegal activities can become blurred. The pressure to produce results, combined with limited oversight and enormous secrecy, creates conditions where corruption can flourish even among individuals who initially joined the intelligence community to serve their country. Michael Harrison was a dedicated intelligence analyst who spent 12 years serving his country before becoming entangled in a conspiracy that ultimately cost him his life. His story serves as a reminder that the greatest threats to national security sometimes come not from foreign enemies, but from the corruption of the very institutions designed to protect us. The memorial stone that marks the location where Harrison's body was discovered bears a simple inscription about service and honor, but those who know the full story understand that his true legacy lies not in the secrets he kept or the intelligence he provided, but in his ultimate decision to choose truth over personal safety. In a world where loyalty and secrecy are often valued above transparency and accountability, Michael Harrison paid the ultimate price for trying to do the right thing. His case remains a stark reminder that, in the shadowy world of intelligence work, the most dangerous enemies are often those who claim to be on the same side. And sometimes, the price of exposing the truth is higher than anyone should be asked to pay. Do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories.